right. So my name is Victoria Connell, and the topic I chose to study this year is ministry. My quote is, "I live my life as if 1 million people hang in the balance, but count it all worth it if one person is saved." And this is actually a quote by my youth pastor. Who am I? I'm a triplet in a family of 6. Like I said, I'm a senior at Frisco High School. I am involved in sports as Frisco High School's girls varsity basketball, and I'm a member of NTHS, NHS, and FCA. I also work at my church with 4th and 5th graders. It's known as a program called Flight 4.5, and the church I attend is Hope Fellowship. Why ministry? So the reason I chose ministry is when I was 11, I felt a calling from God to go into ministry, and specifically at first I thought it was missions. So I was 11, I didn't know how to do this, and later on throughout the years it came to my 8th grade year, towards the end of my 8th grade year, that my uncle passed away. Well, I decided that this was going to be a real test of my faith, and from hearing stories in the future about how people have just turned away from God and been so angry with Him because He took the loved one away, that I didn't want my relationship with God to be ruined by that. And so I decided when I found out that my uncle passed away that I would go to my cousin, who did not know this was happening at all at the time. She was at a friend's house. And so I went there to go comfort my cousin because I felt called to be there. I felt like she was the only child, so she needed a shoulder of someone her own age to cry on. And I felt called to do that. Well, I feel like my faith from that point on grew. Then my summer 9th grade year, I got the privilege to go on a mission trip to El Salvador. And that was a life-changing experience. I got to work with a partnership called King's Castle in El Salvador. It was actually cool because they were located on a dormant volcano. And what we did was, because of the language difference, we had to perform songs and skits to Spanish-spoken songs that would be able to portray what we were trying to get through ministry. And so I was there for a week. I learned a lot. I had so much fun, and I really enjoyed just getting to love on those kids and show them how much God loved them. And I feel like it was not only a growing experience for me, but just impacted the kids' lives as well. So for my career outlook, I actually found out whenever I did my career outlook that the job in ministry is growing, and that's a huge motivation for me, because that means I could hopefully find a job right out of college, just get into it and get started. And so some of the statistics I found was that from 2012 to 2022, the projected growth is going to be from 8 to 14%. And the projected number of job openings is going to be 57,000 jobs, which is amazing to know that I will hopefully be able to just jump right into the field that I want to pursue as soon as I get out of college. For my research, my research was a bit over the place, just trying to figure out whether I was going to focus on the missions aspect of ministry or the youth ministry side, because those have been like the two most impactful parts. So starting with my research, I found an article. It's called The Next Generation. And basically it said what the career outlook assessment implied was that about 80 to 95% of the people who study religion in college and get their degree for religion in college can find a job coming right out of college. That was a great thing to hear and learn, knowing that I could possibly just jump right into the field. It also talked about some different types of ministry, ranging from teachers to directors to youth ministry, and I even heard mention of hospital and prison ministry, and then also entrepreneurial ministry, which is apparently a growing trend within the youth who are deciding to pursue ministry. This article also stated that the biggest challenge is going to be gaining respect for those who are older. With being a younger person going into ministry, you have to know your place, but you have to know your place and you have to respect your elders, but you also have to gain respect from them, because you're learning new things. You're more up to date on like what's going on modernly, and so you have a better advantage of how to like connect with the teens that way. The next article I did was Theological Education in Kenya and the Future of the Church, an Anglican Case Study. Another thing I found out with the articles, they progressively grew in length as I kept researching. So basically this talked about the Anglican Church of Kenya, also known as the ACK, and right now it's growing at a 6.7 per annum rate. It talked about how the theological education institutions, or the TEIs, were there to train clergy in order to go out into Africa and continuing to grow the church. The TEIs taught in 3 different types of models. The first was the Berlin model, so that's teaching theology like how you would a science class or a law class. I thought this was interesting because I've never even thought you could teach something like religion in that sense. The second model, which I think is more modern to me and ideal, is going to be the Athens model, and it teaches the value of human virtues. That's going to be like integrity, like humility, diligence, stuff that you'll find within the workplace, stuff that are skills related to the field that you really, really need to know. And then the TEIs also perfected what they call a fourfold model. So that's using the knowledge of the Bible, the skills necessary to be a pastor, the characteristics that come with being a pastor that you have to have, and the empathy and passion, so the emotional side that you need to have. And those 4 things are focused in the fourfold model, and those are taught throughout the college career. The next article I did was how the church grew in South Sudan. So this focused on the Episcopal Church of Sudan. It's a church of about 5 million people, and Sudan is kind of generalized as a more Muslim type of country. A thing I found really interesting is that there's no separation of church and state in Sudan, which unlike the U.S., you have a separation of church and state. That's why we can't really pursue the topic of religion inside schools, except for this class apparently. And then another thing I found really motivational was just how, coming from Sudan, like, and it being a more Muslim generalized area, the Christians there in Sudan would like stand up for their faith in courageous ways that I thought was beyond amazing. At one point, a town found themselves with 10,000 refugees and just welcomed them in with open arms, and it didn't matter where they were from or what was going on. Like, everyone would like help each other with shelter, food, like just make sure everyone was taken care of. And these are people who like weren't even from that town. Another example was in a Muslim area, there's like Muslim schools on every street corner, essentially. The government decided that they were going to take the Catholic school that was located in that town and convert it into army barracks. So the whole Christian population of that town went to that Catholic school, staged a sit-in, even taunted the soldiers to shoot, like, fire, I don't care. They sang hymns, they sat down, they just prayed. They were like really showing their faith in an amazing way that I feel like is so courageous, and it's just amazing to see a community come together like that. The next topic of research, or the next research topic that I did was the UNT visit, and I got sent in on a contemporary moral issues class, and we talked about the Roe versus Wade court appeal, which is the topic of abortion. And that's a really big controversy in ministry, is like, should you have an abortion, should you not, like, what's going on behind it. And so some cool things I learned from that, abortion was made legal in 1973, and it was made legal from a 7-2 vote. And then the arguments that were originally against abortion that were considered unsatisfactory were the Victorian ideals about sex, the concern for safety, and the parental appeal for the fetus. And the big question rides off the parental appeal for the fetus, basically saying, is it the government's responsibility for that fetus? And the big question is, when is that fetus alive? And so that was something interesting to get to sit on, to get to put my own input into. Is like a lot of people have different hypotheses about like when the fetus is alive, and it's something that I've never really thought about. Just coming from a Christian standpoint, I figured that I would never do it. So it was fun to get to sit in on that and hear different sides of it. And then the last research assessment I did was solving the retention problem through integration, a communal vision for youth ministry. And this article really spoke to me. It talked about how 61% of young adults are becoming spiritually disengaged right out of high school, which essentially means after you have youth ministry, like youth groups and stuff like that, that when you go off to college, you see a decline in the amount of kids who will attend church, who will continue to progress their faith. And so some of the problems that they addressed were that youth ministry right now is being treated as a service. And essentially what it's saying is that it's, from an economic standpoint, that youth ministry is just an act of service. Like, you're not, like, basically the consumer is getting what the people are giving. And that's not how a church is supposed to react. Like, a church is supposed to interact with each other. I know from working with kids in 4th and 5th grade that I learn more from them half the time than I think I teach them. And so it has to be an open relationship between the two. And that's another one of the problems, is the one-way relationship. That you have adults who are just busy on spending time pushing like religion into the kids and like the aspects of the church into the kids and not expecting to gain anything back. And that just hurts the children's relationship with those adults and with the church. There's also the passing language. They call it a passing language, in that most people consider that faith is passed on from like family to family. So like, my family went to church, so I have to go to church, and I'm automatically a Christian because my parents are Christian. When Christianity is supposed to be an invitational relationship. You're not supposed to be forced into Christianity or into any type of religion. Like, you yourself have to accept it and actually go for that. Okay? All right, so my first interview was with Lacey Arthur, and she was the short-term missions associate at Family Legacy, which ironically enough, Allie worked with one of the staff from Family Legacy for her final project, so that I thought that was really cool. What they specialize in is called a camp life and a dream camp. And what that essentially is they go to Zambia, they take whole families over to Zambia to spend a week or like the summer just getting to love on those kids and like teach kids how much God loves them, and just the families come back more changed, I feel like, than anything. She said the coolest part is seeing a dad go over there with his family and seeing how much that impacts a dad and his relationships with his kids. Is that these kids come from nothing, or they're like really, really poor, and so they bring these kids into orphanages, teach them at schools. Like, everything is basically, all the supplies needed are donated. So everything basically goes to those kids in Zambia. But they said the amazing thing that comes out of it is how the families come back completely changed. My second interview was with Greg Methvin, and he was actually one of the pastors at my old church, and I didn't know he moved churches until I found out, and my mom told me about it. But he's a rector at St. Philip's Episcopal Church right down the street, and he talked about homiletics and hermeneutics, which is how you give a sermon. So homiletics is going to be like how you deliver it. Hermeneutics is going to be like how you find it, like what you find in order to give the sermon. And his big question is, what's a healthy spiritual diet for the people of the church? That's how he starts looking for a sermon. And he also said that the main The main necessity that you have to have is the call to ministry. If you don't have the call, you're not going to enjoy what you do, you're not going to enjoy your job, and you're just going to see it as a burden. My third interview was with Brittany Green, and this is actually someone Laura advised me to interview. She's a girls minister at First Baptist Church in Frisco, and she said the biggest thing about her job when it pertains to her job life and her personal life is maintaining friendships. You have to maintain outside friendships from the church, and you have to keep a balance of your time. She said, especially right now that since she's not married, it's a little bit easier for her, but from all the others I've interviewed, that with a family, you have to set time for your family and for your work. You have to have a balance. And she said the class that helped her the most, even though she hated it, was group counseling. She said that's a big part of being a pastor in any field, is you have to counsel people, you have to constantly be there to give advice, and you have to let them know that you're going to be there for them no matter what. My fourth interview was with my youth pastor, Will Perry. He's a student pastor at Hope Fellowship Church. It was a pretty short interview because I kind of know a lot about him already, but it was still insightful. One thing I found really humorous from this was that he said the best strategy to learn was through mentorships, but he could never find a mentor, so he would trick people into becoming his mentors by just getting on their good side and offering to get them lunch and then just shooting questions at them. It's they were unintentionally mentors without them knowing it, and I thought that was really funny. And he said just learning different strategies to teach in the church and different principles for that, because what might work for one church doesn't necessarily work for another. And then he said that your life is basically a performance. So when you're on the stage giving a sermon, that's how the people who are listening to you, that's how they expect you to be when you're not on stage. So he says it's a constant performance. I also got to interview John McKenzie. He's the lead pastor at my church, and he suggested that the best courses that we're to take would be theology, counseling, psychology, and leadership development. All those really run into what I've learned to be a general idea of what a lot of pastors have to do would be counseling people, creating sermons. I mean, you have to know the Bible for that. And then you have to lead a team. You're always working with people. You always have to know what's going on in people's minds, know what they want in order to give them what they want. And he said the biggest skills are also patience and flexibility. You have to be flexible. Another thing that I learned is that from day to day, everything changes. You're not doing the same thing every day, which is good for me because I feel like if I sat at a desk, I would slowly deteriorate. My sixth interview was Libba Tolis, and this is actually someone who Mr. McKenzie said recommended I should talk to. She is the young adults pastor at my church as well. It's kind of funny because half the people are from my church that I interviewed. And basically why he said I should ask her is because she's a woman in the field of ministry, and that's something that you don't see very often. She really said that the things that helped her were to focus on personal evangelism, so whether that be through prayer time, just reading the Bible devotions, and she said mentorships were another thing, which really got me excited that I'm already on that path with finding a mentor. She also said that the hardest part about being a pastor is that it can be lonely. For her job, she has to keep a lot of stuff confidential. So where her husband can come home and talk about his everyday job, she has to be there, and she can't really say what's going on with this person, because then it would persuade the view of what's going on within the church. And so it can be a sometimes lonely activity. And then the last one, this is the one I think looks like an older version of Nate. This is David Pendleton, and he's the middle school pastor at Bent Tree Bible Fellowship. And he also said that one of the biggest classes that helped him was theater, because like I said earlier, it's very much a performance. Your life is a whole performance. And he also said that humor is a very a necessary skill to go into this. I laughed so many times when I was interviewing him. He was so like outgoing and open. It was crazy. His question was, when I asked him how, like what his greatest, like his ultimate goal is, his question was, how would you define success in ministry? If it's money, you're not going to get there. Sorry to say that ministry does not make a bunch of money, but I think I could handle that as long as I get to fill people's lives with the Word of God. And he said that's how you should define success. And he also said that ministry is not just a job, it's a lifestyle. So he said that ministry and his personal life go hand in hand. What you do, like all your friendships you have will be with people you work with from church. Like everything you talk about, well, not everything, but most of the stuff you talk about is going to be church related. So he really said that it's a lifestyle and not just a job. And then for my original work is going to be a kit for homeless people. My dad actually brought up the problem that right now the Frisco Police Department, the police officers themselves are in charge of making little kits, and that's on their own time and using their own money. So what I found that I would do is create a kit of basic necessities for homeless people, and you'd be shocked there are actually some homeless people in the Frisco area. So a kit of basic necessities and also a contact list that has churches that help donate money or supplies, so that way they could get spiritual growth. It will have contact for emergency shelters and contacts for soup kitchens, and these will be distributed by the first responders of the Frisco Police Department whenever they come into contact with these people. So the next thing I hope to do is eventually is to start emailing those churches and stuff to get things ready for my original work, and then also to ask Libba to be my mentor. And then I just spaced. Yep. And then, so thank you for listening to my presentation, and I cannot wait to see how this year in ISM continues to grow my faith and my passion for this field. I don't know, I just spaced all of a sudden.